Hey, folks, for episode number 54 of the Rental Roundtable, we had on Dan Morris. He's the general manager of Kennebec Equipment Rental in Maine. They've got 6 locations. He's also the president of ARA of Maine. Awesome episode. Talked about his story starting 25 years ago, straight out of high school. Took a job at Kennebec Equipment Rental, and he's worked his way up to running 1 location, to running 6 locations, to now talking about a succession plan, to taking ownership in the company over time. I don't think we've ever had on anyone who's worked their way into ownership from a rental company. I've got a lot of people who have started a rental company, they've bought the rental company, they've inherited the rental company, but it's a great example of hard work, persistence, and staying with something for a long period of time. You can start as a hourly person straight out of high school to one day owning the company. Really enjoyed talking to Dan. Talked about how you develop a career in rental, how do you learn about the industry, the importance of networking, and what the role of the independents are against these national companies as consolidation happens, et cetera. What makes independent rental companies great, and how do they stand out? So episode 54 with Dan Morris. Hope you enjoy. All right, everyone, welcome to the Rental Roundtable, episode number 54. I've got Dan Morris on. He's the general manager of 6 location group in Maine, Kennebec Equipment Rental. Dan, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
And you're friends with Troy Greenleaf. He's about an hour north of you, I think, in Maine. He came on a few episodes back and referred you over. So it's the first time I've met you, but obviously I'm a big fan of Troy, and he's good things to say about you. So excited to talk about your experience, 25 years in the industry. So a lot to talk about today.
Yes. Yeah. I started pretty much right out of high school, and it was going to be a couple year, maybe job, and I'd find something else. And here I am 25 years later.
And it probably went fast. And you're currently obviously the current president of ARA Maine. And, I think for today's episode, we'll talk about how do you build a career in rental? What's the role of independence in a space that's increasingly potentially being consolidated, succession planning. And, you've worked your way up, right? You didn't come from a family who grew up in the rental industry. There's nothing wrong with that. We've had a lot of people who second generation, third generation. That's not your story, right? You got this first job at high school and worked your way up. So a lot to talk about today. I always like to talk about, as people listen to these episodes, is your story. How did you get into rental? What was the origin story? How did you get here today? Tell me about that.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, I graduated in high school in 1999, not to date myself. Went to
Y2K.
Went to work for a shop. I didn't have college plans, didn't really know what I wanted to do. So it was kind of figure things out and go from there. Worked for auto dealer, doing some work there with my father. And then a friend of mine actually worked for Kennebec at our Auburn branch, told me they had an opening for shop help. It was fall, September of 2000. Got an application, met with the manager there, great guy, kind of something I looked at as a mentor, down the road. But I mean, he brought me on and said, figure it out. And it was basically as the grunt in the shop, do all the dirty work that the other guys didn't really want to do. So it was kind of a hands-on learning, which was perfect for me. Had never had plans of a career in rental, didn't even know what it was, didn't know what it entailed, didn't know you could run equipment. So it was, I always started green at that point in time, and then learned to just love the industry, company I work for. Like I said, I've been with them my entire career in rental with Kennebec. The owners were great, and they've done, treated me well and given me some opportunities to professionally grow.
You don't really hear many people staying in one industry for 25 years. Definitely not one company in 25 years. Not today myself. I'm a millennial. That's our knock. Gen Z is even worse, right? Every 2 years, get a new job. I imagine when you took that job 25 years ago, did you think you'd be at that company 25 years later?
No. I mean, I think that's, being that young, it was going to be a stepping stone to something else, just enough to get me by. Before that, I'd worked job in high school, and I worked for the dealer for about 2 years. And that was kind of my thing as well. I'll work here for a few years, figure it out. I was kind of looking at a career in like metal fabrication. That's something that as a hobby interested me, and thought that'd be what I do. But a lot of those jobs, you had to have either college, you had to have years of experience. And I was like, well, how do you get experience if you can't get hired at a place to do it? And so that was a struggle. And, like I said, just kind of fell in love with what I did. It was a different thing every day. You're problem solving with customers. And we, at our location still, we kind of do everything from working the shop, writing customers, answering phones. So you learn a lot of aspects of that customer interaction. And really, I take pride when someone comes to me with a problem, providing a solution, whether it's our equipment, the knowledge that we've gained, or even, like I said, sending them to our competition that maybe has something that we don't have. It's still providing a solution for that customer, which I think is huge in the industry, that I don't know if you find out in many other industries, that kind of collaboration between competitors. But yeah, I was there from 2000, and then 2006, we had an opening at one of our other branches, and they offered me the branch manager position there. So it was a jump. It was a smaller store, a little bit slower volume, but was able to move there and grow that. And then 2013, the owners asked me to oversee the entire company, so oversee all 6 stores as the owner's starting to scale back on his day-to-day stuff. Um, One thing I found out is doing that while trying to run a branch until 2019 wasn't the most ideal, wasn't the best
Hmm.
fit. It really spread myself thin. But I mean, again, it's hard because I liked working, doing what I did, and the customer base I had and created all the friends in the industry in that area. So I moved up to our main location here in Fairfield, which was the original location, in 2019. That's where my office is now. It's where we're sitting, and get to kind of oversee everything and run the stores below me.
At this point, you've probably done every job there is to do at the company, probably multiple times, right?
Right. I mean, like I said, and I will still to this day, I will fill
Yeah.
propane if I need to. I'll still do deliveries
Yeah.
if we need to. I'll run equipment, just because I think we are smaller,
Yeah.
up here anyway, where everyone has to do everything. I did accounts payable for, a lot just to fill in for a position when we had an opening there. What needs to be done needs to be done. I'll never say, that job's not for me or I can't do that. Or it's not my
Hmm.
job. It's try to lead by example. If I can empty the trash out, it's not my everyday thing. I shouldn't, but it's sometimes delegating, is needed. But I won't say there's nothing I can't do because there's still things I learn every day. Even 25
Yeah.
years in, there's things you learn new. Just not being afraid to tackle those things where needed and fill in and be that assistance if needed.
Mm. What was that transition like going from individual contributor to manager? You've got that first location. I think it was about 6 years in. Because a lot of engineers or salespeople or whatever your role is, you're doing the job, and then you're promoted all of a sudden to a management job. It's a very different role, and a lot of people have a struggle with that transition. Obviously, now you've been in a manager role for, I guess, 18 to the years, 18 to 25 or something. So you've gotten that part down. But like for a lot of people who are moving up through the ranks and they're now moving to a management role, you're overseeing a location or a team of people. What did you learn through that process? How seamless was that? Or was it trial by fire?
I think a lot of it, and I think this is kind of true to a lot of cases. People are promoted because they're there currently with the company, and maybe
Hmm.
they don't shouldn't be, or maybe skill set they don't not ready for it. But I think it is trying to trial by fire, figure it out. When I went to the Welch branch, it was like, well, we'll give you 6 months to figure it out. Well, it was
Mm.
never known. Well, if I don't succeed in 6 months, what do I do?
Yeah.
But it was, 3 months. They're like, yeah, here you go. They had someone overseeing me. I think it's preparing the employees for it. But if you're younger or, you want to make that step up in the industry, is be a sponge, listen to what's being done, offer, be helpful, learn as much as you can do, even if it's outside of maybe your skill set. If the company you're working for allows that, for me, they were grateful when I'd say, hey, I don't mind running to another store to help out if needed, because I'd learn at that store how things were done.
Mm.
The managers that we had around, we still have a couple that have over 40 years tenure at their branches. So there's a lot of knowledge, a lot of, that skill set that you still can learn from. And I'm not going to say even if as I kind of leapfrog some of these guys, their sites maybe weren't set on trying to oversee everything. They're happy where they were.
Mm.
Um, and they were happy to see me, be able to be willing to do that and take take that role on. But not be afraid, like I said, just to try to absorb as much as you can, get that feel for it. It's even been more helpful to me as I grew within the company. I was able to expose myself to things that the ARA offered. But whether it's on our state board or just some networking events they had, attending the ARA show, and the knowledge you get from both the seminars there, but then also your colleagues you meet. There's always people out there that are in your age range, similar
Mm.
skill set, similar issues, and you realize you're not alone in those
Mm.
problems. Like you can air and not, and be pretty confident that they're going to have either, hey, I've been through that, or here's what I did, here's how we managed it. So, we have a kind of a core group with it. When we were with YPN, we kind of all grew up together with it. And that's an incredible program they offer. And we still keep in touch today where there's people I'll reach out to. And if I have a question and they're halfway across the country, it's an email or a text or phone call.
And YPN is the Young Professional Network, right? Part of the ARA, and I think
That
it's
is
under
correct.
40 is the
Yeah,
cutoff,
18
and
to 40. And when, aging out of that's the worst feeling because, it's a bunch of peers that,
you are
you're not going to get
officially not
officially
young.
together. But we can even if we go to the ARA show, we connect. We always seem to connect
Yeah.
and hang out with each other and still by emails, whatever, however we can connect. But just building those strengths and just, really it's just been not being afraid to learn or not being
Yeah.
afraid to try something new and fail. To me, fail forward, just take that experience and just keep moving up with it. Just don't let it get you down. Don't get bothered. Just, be there. Don't say yes to everything, but I mean, if you're able to contribute and you want to take that step, then just be be as willing to help and take those efforts and make those steps as you can.
Mm. So you're part of the NYPN now, the not young profession. You're not old, but you're not young, right? Is the
Right. Yeah, we're trying
official.
to figure out where we fall into it. We don't want to call old, but I mean it's
You're just
the
not young, or not super young.
right.
You know, I talked to Andrew Hesacker last year. He's, I think, moving out, and it's sort of a milestone. I still got a couple years left to stay in the YPN. It's a great event. I think they do it annually. They have an event last year. It was October, Nashville. ARA, YPN. Google it if you're under 40. It's worth going to. Um, how important is networking? Because I guess what I'm, I had a guy call me last week. He is buying a rental business. I think a lot of people are starting to realize these are great businesses, and if you have capital, access to capital, like there's many ways to get into owning a rental business. One way is working your way up and acquiring ownership over time. One is starting it. One is being born into the right family. You can pass it down. Another way is acquiring it, like ETA, entrepreneurship through acquisition. And he knows nothing about rental. And he asked me, like, how do I learn about this? Right. I'm buying this company and I'm going to get involved. What would you say to someone like that who's like gearing up to learn about this industry? How do you learn?
Right. I mean, I don't know if it's easy to try to learn about it without being in it at some capacity. To
Mm,
me, there's networking groups you can do outside of like what kind of ARA sanctions or whatever, and maybe learn about it. There's some other groups on social media you can figure out. But a lot of them, they want to be people that are not so much seasoned veterans, but just people that have a stake in it. I mean, then we get people I know that have, they work out of their garage and they have 2 or 3 pieces of equipment. Well, they're still a
yeah.
rental operator. And I think that's
Hmm.
where, if you're trying to start from scratch, it's going to be a little bit harder to run if you have no experience. If you've been in the
Yeah.
industry, I think then it's looking at what's the best way to strategically plan it. I think the industry is full of a lot of, I don't want to say old, but I mean,
Not
older
young.
generations. And to me, finding a situation that, if you got to take that business and help grow it, but also have that conversation maybe from the get go and saying, hey, I want to eventually own this. That way it's
Hmm.
transparent right from the get go. I mean, with our company here, I didn't have that in my mind initially, but as I started to go up through, I asked, with the questions, what's the plan of, because they didn't have children, they didn't have anyone that's going to directly take it over. And I asked the questions of what's the plan, can I be part of that plan, and it's a hard conversation sometimes to ask, but I mean, it definitely, I think it aligns what your personal visions are. And then you can see what the owners are. And if they said, nope, that's not our goal at all, we don't want to do that, then maybe I wouldn't be where I am today,
Mm.
and maybe if I didn't show my interest, maybe they would have sold because they didn't know there was anyone interested. So I think, I guess that's easier if you're inside already somewhere, but for someone kind of from the outside trying to get into the industry, um, I tell someone it's not as easy as it looks. We've seen some people come
Mm.
in and leave very quickly because it just wasn't for them. Um, I would certainly recommend getting some experience somewhere at least to kind of get a feel for it. Um, but kind of
Uh,
beforehand.
right. Even just working at it for 1 week, shadowing. Hey, I'll work
Right.
for free for a week or pay me minimum wage. I just want to do every job. I want to learn. I mean, it'd be eye opening. You start to see the themes like pretty quickly how this industry operates. It's a lot of customer service is really important. A lot of last second changes, a lot of movement, right? A lot of logistics,
Right.
um, and whatever what can go wrong will go wrong. You've probably seen every element of that in 25 years, right?
Right. And that's one thing. There's resources we have available now that I wish I had 25 years ago or in the same capacity, same way. I wish I would have
Mm,
jumped in the YPN group way quicker than I did just because I didn't even know it existed.
mhm.
And we've tried to stress that with other owners and other businesses. Like you might not be interested, but people in your organization may be. And
Mm,
try to explain to them this isn't just a go off and they're going to have, they're not going to meet competitors and all of a sudden going to want to move. They very well could, but that's their personal
yeah.
decision. But I go, they're going to go and they're going to learn and they're going to be able to bring back to their business, and I'll plug the area again, what they've done with Rental U and trainings and things that are now are offered available. I think for a new business starting up, those are huge assets that they have that, I hope anyone that jumps on or is a member takes advantage of in some capacity,
Mhm.
because that's where I've gained a lot of knowledge. And I've done courses where I thought I know all the stuff. I take the course and then that course I've learned stuff, or learned a different way to do something I've already been doing. And to me, once they jump on, become a member right off the bat, because there's a lot of resources that they have
Yeah.
at their disposal that comes with the membership to help grow that business and start and maybe say, I want to start as a single store. I only want to do general tool. Where do I go? And once you're in, I think there's so many people that would reach out and just kind of put their arms around them and help build them up. And
Mhm.
let them know what they've done and what they've made for mistakes to say, hey, don't do that because, or I don't recommend that. But I think just making sure all those, resources that you're paying for, or you utilize them. And if you have a question, don't be afraid to ask it, because we've all had to ask it.
Yeah, there's no stupid questions. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously the national shows, but also the state level too. There's so many acts. Every state's got something going on for the most part at the ARA level, and you don't need to fly across the country. It's usually in your backyard. You're president of ARA, by the way, of Maine. What are some of the things that ARA of Maine's working on to help their members grow in your state?
Yeah, so we've tried, to really put an impact on having a couple events a year, educational events, whether it's forklift training or mute training. That's something we've done the last couple of years, where we offer train the trainer events, where ARA sends a trainer out and trains a business owner or employees, so then we can then train our customers, or even other stores, or our own employees. We always try to, last few years, do a vendor night where we're bringing our local independent reps or local vendors in. And it's hard, like when it's a West Coast show, not everyone from, New England or Maine will fly out
Mm-hmm.
there. Sometimes they
Mm-hmm.
can't, time wise, weather, cost prohibitive. So we try to make sure we do that in conjunction with the show, usually before or after. This year was after the show. So we did that, and I had a pretty successful group where we had a decent amount of vendors come in, and good turnout from members as well. And try to introduce them to those resources. And then we have DOT trainings. We've done some tent staking in the past as well, as proper ways to do that. And we're always up for ideas and suggestions from our members. We'll ask them, say, what do you need? What do you have for resource? Sometimes it's, well, I just don't know all the benefits of ARA. They'll send someone up to speak about that and help get that out and that word out. So those are some things we've worked on here. We try to meet as a board once a month, at least by phone call or Zoom call, in person when we can, but just try to be really proactive in what's going, what people are looking for, what we hear. We got a very small membership. It's spread across a large area over the state of
Mm-hmm.
Maine. So we had some tax legislation last year that was passing through, so we had a meeting special on that, and had people come from the northernmost part of the state and the southernmost part of the state, and kind of met in the middle, and had good discussion with that. So and like I said, we're always open for ideas, and those that want to contribute. There's always a spot open on the board too, if needed. So if there's ever interest there.
One of the things I'm fortunate being a rental software that like goes across the entire country is we go to a lot of the state events, so I get to see how different states do different things. And the cool part is like everyone's got their own flavor. Like Florida has, they have a beach getaway in July, which we're going to again. It's on the beach. You bring your family. It's very right. Texas, we went to Texas, and they're raffling off a shotgun for the grand prize. Like that's a Texas thing, right? Maybe you don't get that in, I don't know, Oregon. California's got their event, which I thought was always funny, is in Las Vegas every year. It's not in California.
Right.
Missouri's got a great event on the Lake Ozarks, and they're now including Kansas this year. So, any of the in-person events, I just think it's so fun. Every time I'm always like, I don't know, should I take the weekend to go over there and meet people? And it's been awesome every time. I've met great people, great relationships. Everybody who shows up to the ARA events is trying to better themselves. They're trying to build a better rental company to serve their families, their community. They're trying to help other people. Hey, I messed up this. Let me share this advice, or I've been this 25 years. Let me tell you what not to do, sort of thing. So when you go to these events, you find people who are growth minded, right? By nature of it, not everyone in the industry. I'm not saying it's a perfect industry. Not everyone wants to share all their secrets and wants to participate. There's a lot of people who are inclusive and do their thing, but for the most part, I think it's a very inclusive industry, very communal industry. And the people who participate in peer groups and ARA events, state level events, generally are people who want to share things. YPN is another example, right? I like to soak it up. I go to as many as I can, and because I'm not in one state, I get the benefit of going to many different states. It's just fun for me.
End of July, we have a lobster feed up on the coast, so that's kind of our thing. We did it last year, and it was well received and well attended, and we want to do it again. So we have a store up there that they host it, and then we have a lobster boat cruise up through the harbor. It's a live active lobster boat, but set up obviously for demonstrations where they do that show on the coast, and then we head back and have a lobster feed and barbecue at one of the local stores in the area. So it's a pretty cool event. Like I said, we're doing that this year, end of July. So
I'm going to be in Maine end of July, by the way. We have a family vacation up there, so I may need to stop by, find out. Maybe I'm not invited, but I may come for some lobster. July 20th? Oh, okay. Yep. I think that's the week before. Maybe I'll come up early. Anyways, lot of things too, a lot of events, and it's definitely worth the trip making any of these happen. I want to get back to your story and the succession planning, because one thing you mentioned was how important it is to have these conversations, even if they're uncomfortable, and it's always important to have these earlier than you think, right? Because it can take several years to even put things in motion. We've talked about succession planning in a lot of different episodes here. like you're in the process of doing that at your store. Tell me about what you've learned, and if you could go back and change things, or if you give advice to someone who's in a similar situation to you as an employee who wants to take on ownership of the company at some point, how should they be thinking about succession planning?
Yeah, I think first off is definitely reach out and have, if you're working for a company, the current company you're with, if that's what you're looking at, is reaching out, finding what their plan is, and make sure it aligns with yours. And I've been fortunate enough to, like, where I've worked here. They've always been super, super respectful. You know, I kind of looked, I don't know if I'd want to work anywhere else type deal.
Mm-hmm.
But when we had that conversation, I just had a hard time kind of get out of what I wanted, because I didn't want to seem like, I didn't want to be greedy, but didn't want to be, leave anything on the table. Didn't really know how to have that conversation. No one that's probably part of the plan, but just it was kind of figure out how that was. And then once you agree upon, yeah, this is what we're looking at, I didn't realize the amount of hurdles there are and just time that it takes for the legal side of things and
Mm-hmm.
paperwork and just getting things out, depending on how it's set up. And I think the more stakeholders are involved, maybe if it's just a one owner or whatever, that's one thing. But if there's family, if there's other ties, that's where I think it can get complicated too. And I think just having that open discourse throughout the conversation of what if your plans change or someone else or the owners do, just kind of having that, make sure everyone's still on the same page. And then there's different ways of structuring it. To me, it's obviously there's some great individuals within the industry that, again, if you're an ARA member, you ask them, hey, I need help with this, they're going to
Mm-hmm.
point you in a direction. And there's a multitude of people that can help you that deal with these, probably, I don't say hundreds a year, but I mean, a bunch during the year.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
they can, in probably different size, depending. Are you looking at buying a single store, multi-store? Is the land owned? Is the land leased? There's a lot of things play in that, the buildings and things like that. So, I started to kind of had the conversation. It was kind of pre-COVID. They talked about it, and we really didn't iron things out until we got through that whole the years of COVID,
Mm-hmm.
on how we wanted to work. We knew what we wanted, but nothing was in paper, and that's to me the concern of. I'm more of a fly by the seat of my pants guy, where if they say that's what we're going to do, I trust them that that's what we're going to do, and what will
Mm-hmm.
happen will happen. Not a great way if that's what you're trying to plan your life on too. And people outside of the my little inner circle would thought it was absolutely nuts. Like, you need to have concrete, firm plans. And when I asked for them, I didn't get any resistance. It was simply like, no, that's a respectful question to ask, and
Yeah.
knowing that it kind of helped them also know how serious I was, and wanted to do it. So, um, with that, and I said, just planning place, have it, if you don't have a lawyer, an attorney, or someone that can represent you, make sure you have that on your side of things. And it's not to be, it feel like you're going and attacking, the people you're looking to buy the business from. It's simply, they're in the same boat. They're going to have an attorney that's going to
Yeah.
really work for the best outcome for them. In the end, the one that they're going to work together, make sure you have equal parties or representatives. There's a lot involved too, is if someone's if they're holding the papers or if they're making you buy it outright, make sure you have financial backing and how that works. With it, as for me, it ended up being signing a kind of an employment contract of what the plans are. And it was basically simple goals, performance based, how I could buy stock in the company and then eventually take over majority ownership, and their plans aligned with what I wanted. So we kind of went with it. And, kind of at the start of this year, I finally got stock certificates for the company and making sure that's set up the way too, whether it's an S Corp, a C Corp, an LLC, all that stuff matters on how it's being built. Make sure to have an industry professional, someone that's dealt with that. And I would say specific to the rental industry, because there are so many moving parts with the assets we have, the equipment, any debt service, anything like that is all things that are going to get factored in. And it becomes more complicated as you start to, get into those things if you don't already have a plan in place of how it's going to work.
Well, I mean, I think it's such a cool story. Like, you started straight out of high school and now you're, working your way towards owning the company and one day majority owner of the company. And it just shows that, there's a lot of different ways to own a rental company. And, you don't always have to take the risk. You don't have to use your own money to buy it all, all up front at some point, right? You can kind of work your way into it. And, Warren Buffett would say, like, we talk about diversification. A lot of people say you got to own every index fund, you got to own 1,000 trillion different companies, diversify. But like he would say, if you really know something really, really well, double down on that. You don't need to diversify, right? So this business like back of your hand. You probably know it better than anyone. You know what works, what doesn't work. So when you're thinking about the valuation of where the company's going, you feel good about it, and it's totally appropriate because like you're investing in something that has been your legacy in your life, right? And I think it's a cool story for you to kind of go from high school, straight out of high school, all the way 25 years later to owning it. And from the owner's perspective, right, they think about their own, succession planning and what are their odds? They have a family member, Maybe do they want to sell to a national? There's a lot of pros and cons to that, and maybe they don't, right? But to have an employee who's put the sweat equity in and as a way to kind of earn their way to kind of take ownership, that's probably a pretty cool story for them, and that probably makes them proud. I would imagine.
No, I sure hope so. And same way, I mean, a lot of the conversations they had was building the company as it is, staying independent and working with that, because up here we have the nationals that are all around, and then
Yeah,
they're either popping up or adding new, or they're buying by consolidating others, and I think their goal was they had those opportunities to sell and do that, and they could have been just fine. They cared about their employees and what was going to happen if those types of deals went through. And I mean, I'm as well, same way, we value the employees. I don't want to see someone come and buy it up and then all of a sudden just tear the company apart,
hmm
and strip it down. So, for me, seeing that continue on and seeing that there's a place for the independents, still, I know it gets scary because we see all these record earnings or record profits from the nationals and all that works, but there's a lot of people and a lot of, you know, people you got to please in doing that.
yeah,
Whereas an independent, to me, I can go in every one of my stores and they know me, I know them. There's no, their families, the stories, what they got going on. And I think that does still mean, especially up here in Maine, I think New England thing, I don't know, across the
hmm
country, you get different things, but I mean, I think there's a lot of value in that, of knowing who everyone is, who they are, what they do, what their goals are. And I've reached out to my employees and asked them, what's your plan in 2 years, 3 years, 5 years? We've had some younger guys and they're like, well, I want to settle down and start a family. And I don't know if I can doing this. What's the opportunity to move up? How do you do it? And I can say, this is my story. This is what I did. And we've had some, whether it's through here or it's through another company, if they look and see there's an option somewhere else and that looks good, I'm not going to hold someone back, certainly.
hmm
And actually the guy that got me the job here at the Auburn store when I first started, he left the company, and then, I was able to actually bring him back into the company, almost 15 years down the road, just
Cool.
because he did his own thing, but then, he liked what we had, the culture we
Yeah.
had, what we did. And he really he missed the industry, missed the people, missed that part of it. So, we've had a few that have kind of left and then come back. And I think you see that even in some of our other independents. Maybe it was a family member that left to go do their own thing, and then they came back to the family business. They're realizing how lucky they had it. So,
Mm.
to me, just being out there and seeing how things are and what you want to do with it. I could say I could go, and if I had funding, could I go start up a store all by myself? Yeah, but there's no reputation, there's no name, there's nothing you build it. You're trying to start from scratch. And I think having the recognition, the name, grabbing a company that's got a successful story is the way to do it. And then just kind of continue that, like
hmm It's a lot of inertia taking something from 0 to 1, and I've done that. I've realized how much energy it is. It's whatever you think it is, 10 times more. It's a lot. It's fun, but it's a lot. I'm interested in, like, the longevity of your career here. Like, what's kept you here for so long? And you mentioned employees who have left and even come back, and they realize, like, this is actually grass wasn't greener. This has been an awesome place to work. What about Kennebec Equipment Rental has been so special for you to make you want to retain yourself there? It was someone you probably had other opportunities at some point to go do other things, plus the other employees who have been here for 5, 10, 15 plus years. What keeps people engaged at your company?
I mean, I like to think it's the way the owners kind of led the company, and even before them, his father and mother that ran the company. There's people that work
Mm,
for them, and then you work for the current, and they see that they care about their employees, how they take care of them. It's not corporate, it's not button up. I mean, it's we have policies and rules and things that are in place, but I mean they're very much, yeah. Everyone has things in the issue with families. Whatever happened, personal stuff happens. They're not just going to ignore it and say, "Well, too bad, get to work." If a kid's sick
mm,
or if there's a death in the family or something happens, we've always tried to work around that employee. Okay, how can we help? How can we assist? Or if there's a sickness or whatever, just try to be there and understand everyone. Nowadays you can go anywhere and get a job if you want it. Again, like you said, have I had offers to go elsewhere? Yes. What kept me here was just kind of the culture, the way they ran it, and yeah. Could it be better somewhere else? Could it make a ton more money somewhere else? I don't know. I could probably say yes, but then, you know, there's nothing really would make me want to leave here just because of how they've
mm,
been. It's just kind of been to me a culture they've created where it's a good place to work. It's safe, it's fun. The industry itself, I think, is almost addicting in a way. I think if
mm.
you have that, the ADHD personality or whatever that type is, there's a
Yeah,
lot that really benefits with it. And I know people that kind of thrive in that environment. And it's not stale. It's not the same thing every day.
yeah.
It does change enough where you're not getting just in a rut. Um, and as you go up and then start to escalate or elevate in a company, yeah, there's things that happen. Like I said, there's more responsibilities, things like that. But I think it's just, if you're happy, you get up, go to work every day, and you're not dreading it, then it's kind of like, why do I want to leave and try it out? Sometimes people say it's money or it's this or that, but in the end, we've had, we people come back, and we try to see the value, and try to, basically pay based on what they're worth and what we can do. And we know we're not going to be top shelf or everything. But we want to build not just, okay, what's your hourly rate, but what's the experience,
Hmm.
you have, but whether it's benefits that we offer, things like that. We try to stand out amongst beyond that, to put more than just a dollar on everything. And easier said than done when things are really, really good. When, if it's a recession or things are tighter, or, expenses are going up, things like that, then it makes it harder. But we just, hey, if everyone works a little bit harder and we put a little bit more effort into it, the company makes more money, then we can pass that along. So, um, but yeah, to me, it's the growth point too. Was I see where we're at, and I see where we could be, if we wanted to go those areas. And
Hmm.
it's learning those steps on how to make that happen. It's
Hmm.
my ideal isn't to sit with 6 stores and that's all we have. It'd be, okay, how can we grow? Whether it's within fleet size or store size, there's still an option there to do it. So,
Yeah,
um,
and on the ADHD part, I think even before we got on for 2 minutes, I think your phone rang 3 times. You've unplugged it because that's right. You're running real busy around company. It's crazy, and that's like I like that. It's my personality too. And on the culture side, right? The first thing you said that I think is important for everyone to hear is it starts at the top with ownership and management to really take care of their people. So if your kid's sick, take off, and hey, we made more as a company. We should pass that on, and that could be profit sharing or however else you do. There's a lot of ways to do it. I think that's so important, and I think like that's how I was raised, and I think that's been important to me. But like, not everyone thinks like that. There's a lot of owners trying to milk out every dollar, every penny, and they don't care about the employees are a cog in the machine. Even my job, 5 years ago, is at Uber. My job was to run A/B tests on drivers to figure out what was the like to the penny, how little could I pay you to do a trip to drive, right? And like they got really good at it, right? And they made a lot of money. Uber did, but like, do drivers feel like empowered or they feel like really loyal to Uber, like they really care? I mean, I don't know, probably not for the most part, maybe initially, but like, I think that if you don't have that culture of taking care of people long term, like you can erode trust and you could lose your best people, right? And if you've been there 25 years, I already know that's been a great culture. And if you got people coming back, that tells you have a great culture and it starts at the top. But the other thing I would talk about is your 6 locations. And I mean, how many locations were there when you started? How have you added locations? How have you grown? And sort of how do you think about expansion moving forward?
so when I started with the company, there was 6 when I started, and they kind of had them strategically placed around when they first started the company. It was around industry. We had paper mills, we had a nuclear plant, we had some kind of the Bath Iron Works and the ports and naval shipyard, so Navy contractors. So all our stores are kind of playing around that industry, and then they started changing as some of those things started to shrink up, or the business from them. They closed a new plant. As he's doing some things like that, we kind of had to decide where we want to be as a company, and I kind of come in, like I said, '06 as a manager, but really in 2013, in and around there, probably 2010, we really could see the writing on the wall. Some of these mills, if they're closing or they're doing shutdowns, they're not a 2-week shutdown. They were doing a weekend shutdown.
Hmm.
If a machine went
Hmm.
down, they just weren't fixing it. So you
Hmm.
could kind of tell as those companies were consolidating and bought up, we had to shift. So we shifted more small contractor, homeowner DIY type stuff, getting to that, make sure our fleet was up, because it used to be you could run stuff right in the ground, fix it, repair it, and then send it back out again. And I think the customer itself has changed, where they don't want that. They want the newest, latest, greatest, all the safety features, they want to look good as well. And I think so,
Hmm.
making sure the fleet presents itself, which gave us challenges. You couldn't run stuff as long. You had to flip it every year or every few years. And really figure out what we could add. So we added things back in our inventory that we didn't have, and then we got rid of some items that just weren't big movers anymore. Um, but we're looking around, we can see there's places in the state where there's holes. There's pockets where we may deliver to a service, but it's not either the customer's making a big drive to get to us, or we're having to charge a high delivery fee to get out there, where it's kind of looking around and saying, well, maybe this area of the state's growing, or even outside of the state,
Hmm.
the border of New Hampshire, and we have a store that's right on the border. So it's kind of, how does that work? But in with that, it's also, what do we have for, logistics wise?
Hmm.
And especially now, I think everyone I've talked to is struggling to find people. just talent.
Mm,
Not so much to keep them, but just get them in the door, fill an
mm,
application. When I filled out an application in 2000, I think I was one of like 12 people that responded, and had
mm.
interviews. So I had to prove myself. Now it's we run it and it's hard getting people to come in. So to me, trying to get them in the door first, and then being competing against other industries that are out there, and being able to prove what we can do. And I was told by someone, if you've got someone in now, that if you get them the last 5 years, you're doing well, because that's just
Yeah.
kind of the way it is
That's what I was
nowadays.
saying earlier. Like I was joking about it, but really, like especially younger people, 5 years is 25 years of
Right.
previous generation, right?
Yeah, and it's hard with this industry because there's so much to learn. There's so much different that something you might do something today you might not do for 6 months, or put me so learning all that and what you want to do, and also find someone that's willing to learn different parts of the industry. Some people they want to learn one thing and that's it. They'll do it well and they'll do it awesome, but it's like in a smaller business you have to be able to,
Yeah.
that's your number one task. But hey, you got to do these things too if needed. Be able to fill in and help out. So trying to find that person has been harder to do. And sometimes we don't find them by an application. They come to work for us, and then we kind of figure out what they can do. And then when you start asking, hey, do you want to learn this or that too? A lot of times they're open to it, but
Hmm.
if they've never had that experience, I think there's some of that they're fearful, like they can't do it or they don't want to do it or they don't know. We get people come in that maybe don't know the equipment or even what it does. I didn't either. I said, you can learn it, figure it out. There's a lot of, I mean, everyone has a cell phone now. There's a lot of stuff you can look on there and see what this will do. Equipment comes with QR codes. Just scan that, and that's the manual. Learn about the equipment, and learn on the flies. But yeah, as far as going forward, I think it's just a matter of, like I said, what we either want to add and grow the company to what we can do and cover different lines, or really fill those holes if there's an
Yeah.
opportunity to add a location somewhere else where there's a pressing need.
I never really heard this before, but it's obviously hearing you say this, but like if you're getting a bunch of requests for deliveries really far outside of your location, you could start to sense a pattern. Like, what if we had a location there? What else are we missing? Right. That's a good indicator that maybe you should look at that geo a little bit more specifically. And then on the labor shortage part, like I've heard that from a lot of people. Right. It's short people, but also good people too. Right. Like qualified people who are not qualified people who are honest and want to work hard and show up on time. Right. Like that is not, you can't take that for granted right now.
Right.
Is there a role for like automation or technology to like kind of streamline some things that even if it makes things 10% more efficient, well, that's if you got 10 people, well, now you only need 9 sort of thing. Is there a role for automation and so anything like that that could help a rental company who's short on people?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think there was, the big focus on the rental show this year was, with AI and how that can
Yeah.
fit. And it's not something to be afraid of, be scared of. It's here, it's coming, it's only going to get better.
Yeah.
Whether that's, we say in the right way or not, I don't think we're talking like, Terminator type, you know, doomsday type stuff.
Skynet.
But
Yeah.
things like that where you look and go, okay, some of these movies and what Hollywood's done and said it could do, and kind of learning about that. But it's how can we make that and even make ourselves more efficient? And I think leaning on, like I said, the right software too. As there's a ton of different softwares out there, and to me, it's finding out which one fits your business best,
Right.
and see what there is, and you make sure you're utilizing it. Back to you said, with no one by zip code, I can tell where I have a lot of my business is, and if I have a lot of more business coming from a zip code that we're not close to, maybe that kind of shows me, hey, we can service this area better if we were there. But as far as technology, I mean, I think having a good website. We don't currently have like an ability to go and purchase stuff online or do reservations on our website. It's available, but it's all the inner workings of a business too. We don't know when something's returned. Is that ready to go right back out? What's the turnaround time? Is it going to be an hour, 2 hours, 2 days?
Mhm.
So trying to have that live inventory, I think there's still a lot there that can be worked on. Some of it's internal policies and how you do it. But pickups and deliveries, there's people that have kiosks or these boxes like you see at Home Depot or wherever you get a
Mhm.
package that something could be in there. You just go in anytime you want and punch a code in and get it. I
Mm.
know there's operators around the country doing that with a rental, and it's
Yeah.
interesting how they do it and how it works, because I think that is something where people want that 24-hour,
Yeah.
7 day a week access, which to provide that, it's now we would have to have more people. We're a Monday through Friday, we're 7 to 4. That's what our hours are, and we could, if it's extreme circumstance, we can work outside of it. But otherwise, how can we have technology help that where we can still provide that good service, but also not have a person have to man it. Uh,
Mhm. And
and
Doug Haas is doing and I think in Minnesota, he's doing the like lockers
yeah,
24/7, right? He's sort of piloted that, built that. He's had some success. Obviously, e-commerce, online renting, customer portal was a big thing. I noticed from the Future of Rental show at the ARA. They had the contractor panel. I don't know if you were there, 4 people up there, and they asked all contractors how important the customer portal was, and they were like very important because they want to be able to see what's on rent, buy job site, pay bills, see history, run your own reports, which I thought was interesting. That's like a newer thing I've started to see. That's the national have been driving, but I think some of the independents are starting to move there. And then on the AI side, like I've been, technically machine learning has been like 70 years old or something, right? It's not new, but like in the last 3 years, I've been tracking it. Every year I've sort of following along. I'm going to an AI conference on Friday, actually. And I don't want to go too deep into this because I am a little skeptical still, but however, I think we're getting to a point where I think at the AI ratio, there's a lot of hype, a lot of conferences, a lot of talk about AI. I think in the next few years, I think we're going to see like real AI in workflows that can save someone 50% of their time, right? And if you're short, like not just a little bit faster, but like game changing faster, if it's done well and done in the right workflow, I think the technology is there. I think it's up for the technology software companies to implement that. But I think from my understanding and seeing this play out, like I think it's ready for showtime now. And I've seen it happen in other verticals. So that's what I'm excited about is how can AI be used to power the independents and not in a way the Skynet doom and
Right.
gloom Terminator, right? But like, the nationals are thinking about it. And if they're doing it and the independents not, that's another leg up, right? So I think just watch that space. I'm very excited and bullish on AI. I've been tracking it. And I think now you'll see in the next 2 years, major impacts to rental companies using AI. That's my prediction. But I want to get to the last topic here is the role of an independent competing with the nationals, right? You've 6 locations, you've been there 25 years, business long older than that. Like, what is the role of an independent? Because I think someone could say, well, who cares about the independents, right? The national is going to buy everyone. It doesn't matter, right? There's going to be no independence one day. I don't believe that, but there's some people who would say stuff like that. How do independents carve out their niche? How do they fight back? What is the role of an independent rental company, especially with the big companies are getting bigger? They get more money, more power. They start to roll up other groups. What's the role of an independent rental company now and in the future?
I mean, I feel like right now, I mean, where we can stand out from that or any independence for that matter, is the customer service you provide. I mean, that's something that's kind
Mm-hmm.
of the intangible of how you're set up and what you can do. But I mean, being able to adjust and pivot a lot quicker, maybe if someone has a problem, we can send someone out and go do a delivery. We're not stuck to such a policy or regimen where I've had independents, or I've had them, nationals have stuff out with a contractor that they can't get to it to service it or take care of or swap it out for a week. And my guys know I'll do it if I can do it that day or in a day or two or get something turned around. We'll do it. We'll jump through hoops to make it happen. And they know we're not always the cheapest around. We don't want to be the cheapest guy out there because to me, you get what you pay for. We obviously don't want to be way out of sight where you're turning that business away either. But I think
Mm-hmm.
we've had people that have gone that way and then they've come back to us and been like, well, I went there, it was cheaper, but I didn't get the service I wanted.
Mm-hmm.
They might have had newer equipment. That didn't mean it was going to be better. I think
Mm-hmm.
we can have more of a personal conversation with our customers and what they're doing. Make sure they're getting the right tools, the right training, the right for their application. They're all the stuff they need. And even if you're set up where you're going to retail equipment, do you service it? There's places that will sell equipment. A lot of them don't service it. So when
Mm-hmm.
if you have a service shop and a setup to do it, I think you grab that. And I think people will gravitate, they might buy from someone else and bring it to you, but in time, that next purchase, they're probably going to look at you as being the one that they'll go to. And I think there's a lot of customers that the nationals don't want, that they don't want the DIY or homeowner. I don't think you see that. I think that's
Mm-hmm.
the outlier being like a Home Depot type like store like
Mm-hmm.
that, or some of your larger, hardware store type chains, where they have rental thrown into it. But I mean, with that, I mean, every one of us can go to a store like that and look and see what the equipment is, go to a carpet cleaner at a grocery store that they rent out, look at the condition of it. I mean, that's a lot of times they are disgusting, because someone looks at that once a month, maybe. Our
Mm-hmm.
stuff, every time it goes in and out, it's checked over, it's looked over. So,
Mm-hmm.
and I think there's still a market there. There's still people that want that up here in Maine and New England. I think there's still that people that want to deal with local. They want to deal with a company
Yeah.
that's roots are in the state or close enough because they know they're going to get maybe not treated better, but just the quality of service. And I have friends that have worked for the Nationals that have gone from independent to working for a national, and I have some that have come back from working from a national back to an independent because of just things that they liked or didn't like, and they learn how to do their business better. I think there's definitely a place for every one of them. I think you're ever going to drive by a job site and not see Sunbelt United or one of the big guys out there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, but we have a good relationship with those. And I think that's too, is working with even them, not treat them as the enemy. It's how do you work with them? They might have customers that they're looking for a resource for, and we can be it. And we have a good
Mm-hmm.
relationship, like I said, around the ones that are around us, that will send people our way. I think there's certainly room for it, and I think if you look in the history, there's times where they'd buy up and there'd be consolidation, but then you start to see that, spread back out. So I think, depends on the market you're in. And I think if you do something that can stand out, whether it's, the service you provide, or just having, some of these niche items, like you said, that maybe
Yeah.
they don't have, because at the end of the day, they get stockholders, they get shareholders that expect a certain profit margin. The independents, you're not so much, we got to do enough to keep the lights on and keep the doors open. And I think the same with brick and mortar. I think you could do a lot online, but you still need that brick and mortar to really sustain the product and keep that quality of service up.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, obviously the independents can move faster because they're more nimble. They can win on customer service. The thing I also learned from talking to you today is like, I think culture can be a differentiator, right? Because if you're one of the 1,000 of United employees, like you're going to take that call at midnight and go out there, maybe, but what if you like know the owner and you also know that they let you take a week off because your kid was in the hospital, and they also know that if you're more successful as a company, you get profit sharing, you get a bonus at the end of the year. Like, who's going to be more likely to be hungry and go win that customer over, right? So I think when we talk about customer service, like being small and nimble is important, but like having people bought into the vision and culture, like any corporation, I don't care how great you are, that's hard to have, right?
Right.
So Dan, it's been awesome having you on today. Like really cool story here, and you kind of start out from high school, working your way up to manager, general manager, and now potential owner of the company. Final question I like to ask folks: what's the best piece of business advice you've gotten that's kind of helped shape your success in your career?
Oh, that's a tough one. I mean, there's so many things, so many nuggets. Like I said, I've learned from it. Probably again from the owner. When I looked at going back to school after working for the company for a bit, just to see if I don't know how to run a business, and he goes, "You'll learn far more in the trenches than you will sitting at a desk in a college course." He
Mm,
goes, "Maybe that's a good basis," but he goes to me, look at it, it's going to be a waste of your time. If I had it in my head, it was one thing, but he goes, he saw no reason to go back. He goes, but it's also not to ever stop learning, and I think with that, if there's an opportunity to learn, keep it up, and never feel like you're the smartest guy in the room. There's always somewhere you're going to improve, you learn, and just kind of keep your ears open for that. So.
mm. I love the growth mindset. It's so important. One of our board members is like 80 years old, and I'm sending him notes from conferences, and he's like trying to learn. I'm like, what are you learning for? I don't know how much longer you got, but I think it's important to have that mindset. No matter how old you are, just keep learning, keep growing. So,
Yep.
Dan, it's been awesome having you on. Appreciate everything you do for the ARA and for the industry. Thanks for joining today.
Awesome. Thank you, Kyle.